by Andy Staples of On3.com. And Andy, I thought your announcement of where you're going or now at with On3.com, just like an athlete with the commitment picture, committed, tearing open your jacket, and there's a T-shirt or a shirt with On3. Who came up with that idea? Was that you?
That was me, because when you, in real life, were a 0-star walk-on, you always wanted to get the 5-star treatment. So that's one thing I told him. I was like, listen, if we're going to announce this, let me announce it like everybody else, because we've got a guy who does a lot of the recruiting edits, the commitment edits for the recruits. And so we took some goofy pictures and sent them to him and said, do your worst. And it was tremendous. It was more than I could ever have hoped and dreamed for.
So when is your show going to be on? And I'm sure you're still going to write, which would be a tragedy if you just went all video. We'd lose that. But what's the new show going to kind of circle around? How's it all going to play out?
It'll be very similar to the podcast I did when I was at The Athletic, where we do 5 new shows a week. The difference is now it'll be a more fixed schedule, whereas before we kind of recorded when we recorded, and sometimes we went live and sometimes we didn't. We're going to try to go live as often as possible. So if people like doing that, like interacting with the show, and want to be with us on YouTube, they can. Or if they want to get it in podcast form the next morning, then it'll be there for them. So we're going to record in prime time, 7 p.m. Central most nights, and then we'll be live a lot of nights. And then the next morning, if you want to listen on your commute, it'll be on all the podcast platforms. So it'll all be there for you. Same concepts, hitting all the biggest stories in college football, and just trying to have as much fun as we can, because it is the most fun sport in the world.
It is the most fun sport in the world, Andy. You're absolutely right about that. It's about to get even more intriguing in some ways with just all the stuff that's on the horizon, from realignment to expanded playoff and all of that. It's a very interesting time in the media industry. But how do you feel about the way college football and the media and the support and the fandom has kind of adapted, and is also, I don't know, it feels like there's a little bit of growth ongoing as the sport starts to, blossom a bit?
Well, I mean, it's the second most popular sport in America right now behind the NFL, so it's doing all right. And it's funny because all the muckety-mucks in charge said if NIL ever came to be, or this ever came to be, that it would be the death knell of the sport. No, it's actually growing, and people seem to like it. And if you look at what they're paying to televise it now, it's the numbers are monstrous. So it's just getting bigger, and I think people. Yeah, it's interesting. The NIL stuff, I don't think anybody cares unless there's a big story about it where, I did a story on this guy that Florida had signed, and there was a contract for $13.8 million where there wasn't actually any financial backing behind it. Like that was a big deal. Or if somebody has a really funny commercial, like when the dude named Coldest Crawford, who was playing for Nebraska, did an HVAC commercial. So that's all that people care about with that. More than anything else, they just want their games. And I kind of think the pandemic made us not take it for granted anymore. Like, oh, this could be taken away from us. There could be times when this doesn't exist. So let's enjoy this. Let's watch it. Let's go to games. Let's have fun with it. And I really think people have embraced it. I think people are excited about the 12-team playoff. You get your usual stick in the muds who don't want anything to change. They want it to be like it was when they were in 8th grade. But I think everybody else is looking at it like, hey, my team might actually have a chance. My team might actually be able to compete for the national title instead of just these same 3-4 teams.
In fact, with that being said, with the 12 teams, there will be more of the higher the hierarchy of college football. But what does the playoff do? Does it help the blue bloods more, or does it help the ones who perhaps otherwise would be left at home?
I think the way they structured it helps everybody a little more. And so you guys obviously follow Baylor very closely, and I'm very interested to see what the Big 12 looks like in this new iteration, because we start in 2024 with the 12-team playoff. Oklahoma and Texas are gone from the Big 12. The 4 schools that are coming in this year will be there, so they'll be at 12 unless Brett Yormark gets 2 more, which I know that's always a possibility. But you think about it, even without Texas or Oklahoma, if you look at the numbers since the playoffs started, that version of the Big 12 should be able to get 2 teams in most years. And I don't know in a different format if Baylor, K-State, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, schools like that would feel like they had that decent a shot at it. Like the 14 playoff, Baylor and TCU were close in 2014, but it hasn't felt that close for them. They'd be in a lot of those years. When they won the Big 12 a couple of years ago, they'd be in the playoff. And I think that changes your view of the whole season. It changes your excitement level before the season, and it changes how engaged and interested you are during the season.
Yeah, Andy, I think it's probably the best idea they've ever had to not make college football the survivor pool where when you lose, unless you're a certain handful of teams, once you lose one game, you're out. And so that was the other thing I never understood the argument against of like, well, if my team lost on October 10th, then I can forget about January 3rd altogether. It just didn't seem like it made sense.
Yeah, it didn't. It never made sense to me either. And the only argument people could give for why they wanted it to be that way was, well, I want to see the best team. Okay, well, you don't know if you got the best team because for the longest time is it the undefeated team? Like, I remember 2012. Notre Dame gets destroyed by Alabama in the national title game. Georgia was way better than Notre Dame that year. Like, Georgia barely lost Alabama in the SEC title game. They would have killed Notre Dame. Texas A&M actually beat that Alabama team. They would have killed Notre Dame. So did that game determine who the best team was? No. I think you're actually going to have more games between the best teams now that determine the best team at the end. Now, is it still going to be one of that small group? Yeah, probably, because that's the only team, the kind of team that can get through that meat grinder. But I do wonder, with more teams kind of in the mix, do a few recruits who would have gone to Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, that group, do they get sheared off? Is it one or two decide to go, oh, you know what, Penn State makes the playoff a lot, so I'm going to go there. Wisconsin makes the playoff a lot, so maybe I'm going to go there. Because the more that happens, the closer everybody gets together. I think that's probably what needs to happen to get a larger pool of people who can actually win the national title.
Hey, Arizona just landed a 5-star in like the last half hour.
I know. Hey, Jed Fish and I were students at the University of Florida at the same time. He was not on the football team. Now, he volunteered to work with the football team later and learned a lot from Coach Spurrier. But he has done a phenomenal job at Arizona. Like, I don't think people even understand. That roster was in bad shape when they fired Kevin Sumlin. And Jed Fish has come in and really changed things. So this will be, if this guy sticks, he'll be the highest rated recruit they ever had. And last year they set the previous record with a wide receiver. So, I mean, it's rolling there. So it's one of those things that's funny because people look at teams that have not played very well of late, and it feels like you'll never get back. But like Arizona's coming back. You look at what Lance Leipold's done at Kansas. You can come back from the abyss. This is a lot of work.
I'm glad you brought up it's a perfect transition into the Big 12, Andy. I know that one of the videos you posted after your announcement was talking about the newcomers and BYU and how they'll fit in and all of that. What are your thoughts on this crazy one-time only 14-team, 4 teams in, 2 teams out Big 12 that's coming up this season? It seems like there's a lot of buzz for various reasons, but where is it on your interest scale in 2023? Very
interesting because nobody's going to feel sorry for Texas and Oklahoma, but everybody's going to be taking their shots at them. It's going to be wild. And it's really, they're going to be the target on the back teams, and they usually are. But, I think it's fun that everybody is going to get a crack at all the newcomers will get a crack at one of them in their home stadium this year. Like Cincinnati gets Oklahoma for the Big 12 opener. And then Texas has to go to Houston, which I just love because I talked to some of the Houston people about it after the schedule came out. And they're like, yeah, before they would have made us move this game to NRG and it would have been 75% Texas fans. Now it's going to be all Houston fans.
Andy, you mentioned Coach Spurrier a second ago, and you were very close to that program then when he was there. I did a top 5 list last week about coaches who would the old school coaches who would kill it in this era. And I think Steve Spurrier, as maybe one of the original CEO coaches, would do very well right now. A young Steve Spurrier.
He wasn't a CEO. Steve Spurrier was the quarterback coach, the receivers coach, the play caller, but he could only because he has this savant level ability to see things from the sideline that most people can't see from the press box. But it would have been interesting to see him in this era of NIL because he's always been, well, let's pay the players. So he was always for that. And I think it would have helped him because he didn't like a lot of the recruiting stuff. He thought some of the recruiting stuff was kind of icky. I think he wouldn't have to, because he wouldn't do the car salesman thing. He wouldn't do you're the most important player ever recruited, and I'm guaranteeing you a starting job. He would never do that. He's like, well, you can come play Florida. We'll find somebody who'll beat you. And that doesn't work on every 5-star. So I think he would have liked this era better where the kid's like, okay, cool, you got a good offense. Can I get a good NIL deal? Okay, I'm good.
We mentioned, or Paul did, and it was no clue that there's no brainer that Barry Switzer was already in his own NIL era, wasn't he?
Well, listen, I grew up in SEC country. The NIL era has been going on by a different name for 100 years. So, but the thing is, Barry Switzer also outsmarted a lot of people. The thing is, take the Southwest Conference and pre-integration in the Southwest Conference, Barry Switzer just killed it in the state of Texas and forced them to move a little faster than they would have. And but it's interesting. There are a lot of coaches that I can think of from the 70s and 80s who would have probably enjoyed this era a little bit more.
Andy, the combination of what you do if you need to report and or investigate and or give an opinion or have a sharp edge, combined with your sense of humor, has that who you've been all of your life?
Oh, yeah. This is what I like to do. Now, when I got into the business, I worked for newspapers, so it was a very, kind of set role. Like when I was the beat writer, you don't give your opinions. You just report the news, and there were columnists who give their opinions. But the internet changed everything and made it where you got to be able to report, find news. You got to be able to give opinions. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do because you got to go back and talk to people after you've given an opinion sometimes. And sometimes it's an opinion they don't like. But I feel like if you treat everyone fairly and, if I give an opinion, I'm not doing it just to make you click on it. Now, I may have some strong opinions. Like I was on one of our podcasts today, and I was pushing back against J.D. Piquel, who's one of our other hosts, because he had said, it's not a failure if Texas doesn't win the Big 12 this year. And I said, no, it absolutely is a failure if they don't win the Big 12. When are they going to come into a season from this point forward where they're going to be favored in 11 of the 12 regular season games? That's not going to happen again. So, yes, they do need to do that. And it's a strong opinion, but it's a legitimate one. Texas is loaded this year. This is as talented a team as they've had probably since when Matt Brown really had it rolling. And they need to be able to win. So that means they need to be able to beat Kansas State. They need to be able to beat TCU. They need to be able to beat Baylor. And in the past years, those have been games they've struggled with.
Then I have, if you don't mind, one follow-up. And I know the dog wants to go out, I think, here pretty soon. Will schools like Texas or Oklahoma, and again, Texas has struggled really on and off. There have been some better years than others, but the last 10 or 12 years, Oklahoma had their first in a long time. Are schools like that are used, especially Oklahoma, used to running the table, maybe not as recently, are they ready to understand that 8-4, 9-3 might be the norm rather than the 11-1 and 12-0?
I don't know if they're ready for that quite yet. I think they're working their way there. Texas probably should understand that because they've had a lot of it. But Oklahoma's a little different story. And that's why when people say, well, Oklahoma's in for a rude awakening in the SEC, I'm not so sure they are. Because other than Ohio State, Oklahoma's been the most consistent winner in the history of college football. I kind of give them the benefit of the doubt to figure that out when they get to the SEC. When they say, okay, here's how the rosters are constructed. Here's how everybody spends their resources. Let's just do that. And I'm actually more confident in that. I don't know necessarily Brent Venables is the right guy. He's going to have to prove that with the way he coaches on the field. I actually trust Brent Venables more than I would trust Lincoln Riley to bring them the kind of roster they need to survive in the SEC. But I trust Lincoln Riley coaching on the field more than I trust Brent Venables right now. Mm-hmm. So he needs to prove that he can do that. But as far as the administration at Oklahoma, I think they're going to figure it out because historically they've always figured it out. Texas is a little more of a question mark. Texas is a lot more like Florida, like USC, where they've had these big ups, where they had when they hit the right coach, they really get going. But when they don't have the right coach, it's a struggle.
Thank you, Andy. Congratulations on your opportunity with On3.com. Good luck with the podcast and all the other things you do. We appreciate your time.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Andy Staples, On3.com, was with TheAthletic.com when it first launched. And of course, there's a lot of movement. We think about movement.